And at this time, I believe our speaker is going to be introduced by Lynn Gilmore.
Well, on behalf of Irene Walters, I'm pleased to present today's program, which is about our Community Foundation of Greater Fort Wayne. Um, Important to the community because it connects people and resources to build a more vibrant community. And they do this in three ways. First, they help people make their charitable giving more impactful. Second, they connect funding to nonprofits through grant making. And third, they provide leadership to address community needs and improve the quality of life. And we're pleased to have two representatives from the foundation today, Brad Little and Alison Gerardot. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction to Brad Little. As you know, is a member of our club, and he's also the president and CEO of the Community Foundation. And as such, he is responsible for setting strategy to achieve the organizational vision set by the board of directors. And he's also its chief spokesperson. Brad's responsible for shaping the Community Foundation's role as a civic leader, grant maker, and philanthropic partner. And in a more boots on the ground role, he's responsible for the management and oversight of the Community Foundation's operations and staff. As you may recall, Brad moved to Fort Wayne in 2018. He's the father of 5 kids, and any free time he has is devoted to them and his wife, Melissa. And their favorite place, I'm told, is to hang out on their boat. He also collects manual typewriters and currently has 5 in his collection, along with an electric IBM Selectric 1. I got rid of all of mine. I graduated from college, I think. Brad today will be discussing the accomplishments of the foundation during this unprecedented COVID-19 year. Also joining us today is Alison Gerardot, who is the Vice President of Philanthropic Services and the Women's Fund Coordinator. Alison is responsible for collaborating with individuals on their personal philanthropy, developing and implementing strategies for growth, and helping elevate philanthropy throughout our community. In 2020, in partnership with the steering committee, Alison helped launch the first Women's Fund of Greater Fort Wayne, which is held at the Community Foundation. And she will share with us why the community needs this fund, how it came to be, and where it's headed. So please welcome Brad Little and Alison Gerardot.
All right, thank you, Lynn, and fellow Rotarians. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share some of the things that we've been doing at the Community Foundation over the last 10 months or so, when the pandemic hit and it was all hands on deck. But before I start, I want to acknowledge board members Irene Walters and Carrie Minnick, who are also fellow Rotarians and have been a big part of what we've been able to accomplish here in the last few months. And also, I too want to say our future's in good hands. If Quinn and EE are an example of students making their way in the world. And EE, if that's you winging it, wow, I can't wait to see when you actually have times to prepare remarks. That was pretty amazing. So Lynn, are you the one controlling our slides, or we can advance a couple of slides? So those are the 3 things Lynn talked about. And I hope that as we share with you some of the things that have been happening, that we really tried to connect to those. And that's essentially our elevator speech. You know, when someone asks what we do, you're with the Community Foundation, that's how we respond. We work with donors, we give grants to charitable organizations, and we participate in community leadership. And so I'm really proud to say that our board, our community, has responded in just an amazing way when it comes to dealing with both the pandemic and, as EE talked about, the social justice issues, the protests, the horrific death of George Floyd. And so all of those things over the last 10 months, our board, our staff, and key organizations in the community have just been amazing. And so one of the things I'm really proud about is our board early in March, probably mid-March, when we realized this was not some sort of one-off flu, but that the pandemic was really here to stay. we huddled quickly and decided, okay, this is not something the Community Foundation can tackle on its own. So how do we partner with other organizations that are doing great work, with our donors, with other companies, and with other community leaders? So in front of you are just a small sampling that of the groups that we've worked with and some of the initiatives that I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail. But United Way, Fort Wayne United, our Giving Tuesday Now, partnering with the Ash family. We did a couple of things internally, like fast tracking grants to nonprofits, which a lot of our funders, AWS was mentioned earlier by Lynn, Follinger Foundation, Lutheran St. Joe, United Way, just a lot of groups were able to respond quickly to their grants and just fast track their processes. And probably once we realized the importance of Zoom and virtual technology, we were able to create a technology fund, and we put $50,000 in there to start helping with some of those technology expenses that we were all experiencing, but particularly our nonprofits that were having to pivot to more virtual type services. Second slide. So right out of the gate, when we look at what our board was able to do, and so if you think about when the governor made his proclamation on March 19th, we were able to meet as a board and make a $50,000 contribution to the United Way Emergency Relief Fund. And then as a result of that, but also had the privilege and have the privilege, both Alison and I, of sitting on the Emergency Relief Fund Advisory Committee. And I know we had Matthew as a guest speaker a few months ago, and he too talked about how partnering with key funders and doing great work in the community. So I thought I'd give you a quick update. As of our last meeting, which was a week ago, that fund has now raised $3.5 million. We've awarded 48 grants to 35 organizations, totaling a little over $900,000, and funded 4 initiatives for about 1.7. And we still have about $1 million left to give out of that fund. So I was just thrilled we were able to be one of the first to step up out of our own emergency relief fund and help with United Way. And they're just, as we all heard from Matthew, United Way is just suited to do this kind of work, and that's how we felt. Second thing we did, the next slide, is we partnered with Arts United and some other leaders in the arts and culture community, and we created the Artist Relief Fund. And really as a way to help those who are in the artisan community. And we made it really simple. We tried to model after some other communities that are doing this really well. Indianapolis is one of them. And really all we needed was artists to show us how they lost revenue through this pandemic, whether that was a lost gig at a bar, a contract for a show, an exhibit if you were an artist. And the grants ranged anywhere from $2,000 to $1,000. And you know what's humbling is I had the chance to intercept an artist out in our parking lot one Friday afternoon and hand him a $300 check. And he was going to pay his rent, to keep his rent current and his utilities on. And he literally had a tear in his eye. And it was like he'd won the golden ticket, from Willy Wonka, and it was a modest amount. So it's just been really humbling how money can help and resources can help. And so through this first phase of our Artist Relief Fund, we were able to provide 89 grants to individuals totaling, $57,000. We're getting ready to announce phase 2. In fact, we started talking about that this morning. So there is going to be a round 2 that will most likely launch next week. And we've added a new, even more exciting wrinkle to it for artists out in the community. Next slide. Then we partnered with Tim and Libby Ash, who have just been incredibly generous, and they realized early the importance of our restaurants, our bars, and our food service and hospitality industry. So if any of you know Tim and Libby, Tim auctioned off some of his collector cars and raised $500,000 and created the Ash Hometown Prosperity Fund. And it was, as the second bullet shows, it was designed to help locally owned restaurants, coffee shops, food trucks. They had to have revenue of less than $500,000, and they couldn't be a franchise or be a multi-location. We also had a couple of folks who you would know their name that served, that weren't eligible for this, but own restaurants in our community that served on our advisory committee that reviewed the applications. And this is really neat because, again, back to the expertise of our team and being able to figure out a way to make this happen. This was what's called a recoverable grant. So it's a grant to the individuals that own the restaurant. And if they so choose to repay, they can repay over the next 10 years, but they don't have to. But it's and the Ash family said, we want this fund to live in perpetuity to help others when these kinds of situations happen again. So the maximum grant that an owner could receive is $50,000. And when it was all said and done, we awarded $500,000 to 17 restaurants, a couple of coffee shops, and even a food truck, which was really cool. And then we did Giving Tuesday Now, which Alison, if you want to ask her questions more about this later, it was just a phenomenal day on May 5th. And in 12 hours, we raised more than $700,000 that benefited 110 nonprofits in our community. Early in advance, they registered online and put their needs out there, so funders and donors knew what it is they were raising money for. And we had 21 of those requests fully funded through this process. And just to give you just a glimpse of the activity we had, in those 12 hours, we had 3,000 donors give 5,000 gifts. And we had another group of donors that put up $100,000. And if any of you participated in that, we had matches and incentives and pop-up matches and 2-to-1 and all those sorts of things. We had donors contribute to that fund to be able to make this happen. And so if you have your calendar out, or we have a date set for this year, which is April 20th of 2021 will be another giving day for us. And then we followed that up with partnering with Fort Wayne United in response to the protests and the community conversations that were going on. We felt it was important to draft a letter to the community, which we did, and we issued publicly on June 4th. And it was our stake in the ground for our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice. And then, we felt as a board and an organization, we had to do more than just a letter. We really had to put some money where our mouth was. And so we were one of the first to step up and put seed money in the United Front initiative of $50,000. And we had Joe Jordan and Irick, who have also been guests here at Rotary, visit with our board. And as we made that investment, and now all of our board and staff are going through the United Front curriculum, which kicked off last week. And if you happen to catch Joe Jordan do the introduction and welcome, there are now 150 companies and organizations representing over 6,000 employees, basically, that are participating in United Front. And it's just really, really important for us to be a part of that. And then next slide, our most recent is Operation Vaccination. So we're partnering with Mindy over at the Allen County Health Department. And how can we find gaps where we can help between the federal dollars and the state dollars, which all of that is still being sorted out, even while we're giving vaccinations at the Coliseum and some other remote sites. So in a collaboration with AWS, St. Joe, Lutheran, Follinger, and Allen County, we've raised $200,000, and our goal is $500,000. And again, it's just to do, so for instance, some of the things that Mindy and the team are able to do is provide hot meals for the volunteers at the Coliseum so they don't have to leave the facility. I know we're in discussions with CTN and SuperShot on how we can help fund the things they're doing to expand our reach on the vaccinations. So then in the middle of all of this, we also launched a women's fund. So it's my privilege to hand the microphone over to my colleague, Alison Gerardot, to talk about the women's fund. So Alison, take it away.
Thanks, Brad. I would say when I started at the foundation, just to give a little bit of background on the Women's Fund and to how it came to be, I had observed that there were many women's funds across the country, and we know there are about 145 women's funds across the country, ours being the 146th. And many of them reside in community foundations. And I just thought it was very odd that there were, for the second largest city in the state of Indiana, that there wasn't a women's fund. And so it led to a listening tour, which led to many discoveries, one of which the last time that there was a study done on women and girls in Allen County. And that was the last time that study was done was in Lebemoff's mayoral era, which was done in 1974. And so at that point in time, a group convened and said, we really like the idea of a women's fund, but we really want to see how a new study impacts impacts the formation of a fund. And so we began on the journey of launching the Women and Girls study of Allen County, which launched at the same time that the Women's Fund did. So just a little summary of what the Women's Fund is doing and is that we're committed to understanding and overcoming the challenges facing women and girls in Allen County. We believe that families and communities truly thrive when women are economically and physically secure, safe, and healthy. Through research, education, and collaboration, we're working to uncover and address the most important issues to reach our ultimate goal of a thriving community for all. So I'm going to very quickly go through some of the study results of just to give you some very two highlights from each area. So we know that when we look at doing a study for women and girls in a community, we're looking at all of the things that affect women's economic security. So we looked at 4 specific areas for women, and then we looked at young women and girls as their own separate bubble. So 5 areas in total that the study covered. The first area was employment, education, and training. So here's the 4 areas that drive women's economic security. So employment, access to resources for both physical and emotional health and well-being, caregiving, and personal safety. So within the employment bucket of what we studied, we know that in Allen County, 75% of working age women are in the workforce. We outpace our state and national peers. We have many women, most of the women in Allen County who are of working age are in the workforce. And we also know that 84% of single mothers with children under age 18 are in the labor force as well. And which can be defined as either they are working or they are looking for work. And we know that, kind of pausing there for a moment, then we know that 24% of those full-time employed women make less than $25,000 a year. Full-time employment can be defined as multiple jobs that make up a 40-hour work week, so it isn't necessarily defined as one singular job. We also know that 71% of women make less than $50,000 a year, so almost 3/4 of women who are in the workforce. And then we know that those single mothers who are in the workforce have a median income of $22,000 a year, many of them which make up our people in poverty in Allen County. In healthcare, which we took a look at, we know that 26% of women did not have access to healthcare because of cost. So we know overall, most women in Allen County are covered by health insurance. That was taken by the Affordable Care Act, made a huge drop, and then Allen County did sort of Medicaid expansion. And so that made a huge drop off as well. But we also know that 1/4 of women still see finances as barriers to healthcare, whether that's because of high deductible healthcare plans or whatever that case might be, that they aren't able to access that care because of cost. We also know that cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for women in Allen County, and we outpace men in that area in Allen County as well. What we do know in healthcare overall, when you look at the study, we know that women in Allen County, this is not a Allen County only phenomena, is that women in Allen County are much more likely to take care of others before they take care of themselves. And we need women to start taking care of themselves as well. So looking at caregiving, when we talk about caregiving and how we defined that, we're not only talking about childcare, we are talking about the holistic look of how women are typically the primary caregivers, whether that's in the sandwich generation, caring for their parents or their in-laws, as well as adult children, maybe children with disabilities, or younger children as well, or ailing spouses. we know that in the caregiving arena, 23% of women, so almost a quarter of women, do not have any paid time off. This includes sick time, bereavement, vacation, nothing, zero. So we starts to ask the question, if you are one of those single mothers who are have children under the age of 18 and you're making $22,000 a year and you have no paid time off, how do you make sure that your children are cared for if they get sick or if anything comes up? And we also know that 59% of women say that caregiving affects their paid employment. And there's a whole range in the study, if you download the executive summary, that there are about 6 different reasons of how their paid employment is affected. Things such as not being in the workforce because of caregiving responsibilities, or not taking a promotion because of their caregiving responsibilities, things of that nature. The 4th bucket for women that we looked at was in personal safety. So we know that in Allen County, 70% of women have experienced some type of crime, be it violent or non-violent crime. This can include anything from robbery, domestic violence, or domestic abuse, sexual assault. We included things such as robbery or home invasion, car break-ins, because we really believe that any type of violence creates a level of trauma. And when we know that, then we need to be able to address that. And so 70% is a pretty high number. And it took our committee by surprise. We also know that 35% of women, so over a quarter of women, have experienced domestic violence, or what we like to call domestic abuse, which doesn't necessarily mean just physical abuse. It also can be emotional abuse, financial abuse, and sort of the all-encompassing domestic partnership violence. And then we also know that 42% of women do not report their experiences of crime. The main reason is that they don't think that there's anything the police can do about it. And there's a whole list, if you download the executive summary, again, a whole list of reasons why women do not report crime. So what's very interesting is when you look at the Fort Wayne Police Department data, we know that those numbers are only telling just a fraction of the story, almost just a half, if we're looking at 42%. So we're really not getting a full picture when we look at actual crime data. This was taken from a survey that we did as part of the study, which was an Allen County-wide survey that was statistically significant. And we oversampled in our urban and our rural populations, because we know that typically suburban white women like to take surveys. And so we wanted to have a really accurate representation of the entire county. Then our 5th bucket was young women and girls. And so there were 4 areas that we looked at, but here are just 2 highlights. We know that overall, Allen County girls achieve really highly academically. All of their scores are higher than their male counterparts, whether that's 3rd grade reading scores, academic honors diplomas, overall just generally feeling like they're reporting more A's than their male counterparts. But their confidence in those achievements are very low. We look at about 25% rates when we look at girls who do not see the importance of how their academics affects how they live later in life and their desire to go on to further their academics, whether that be through college or through trades, going further in their life. And then we also know that girls report feeling sad. Middle and high school girls report feeling sad and hopeless and have higher rates of contemplating suicide. Girls, we look at girls between 7th grade and 12th grade, and it ranges between 35 to 42% of middle and high school girls, both feeling sad and contemplating suicide. The rates are very high. We also know this is not an Allen County phenomenon. This is nationwide. Boys do have higher rates of completing suicide, but girls have much higher rates of contemplating suicide and those feelings of sadness. So what do we do with all of this information? So our steering committee, thank goodness for them, got together last January, and we began putting together a vision, mission, and values for the Women's Fund, and really used the data to help drive how the Women's Fund moves forward. So the Women's Fund of Greater Fort Wayne acts as a catalyst to strengthen our community. We mobilize resources and establish research-informed priorities to close opportunity gaps for women and girls, regardless of place, race, and identity. So with all of that information, we decided that the sort of how we would do the work would be through research, through education, and through advocacy. Those are gaps that our steering committee really felt needed to be addressed in the community. And then based on the data, we are focusing right now for at least the next 2 years, probably longer than that, in these 3 priority areas based on the study. So we are focusing on economic equity, which right now looks a lot, focuses specifically on employment. We'll be focusing on personal safety, and then also on young women and girls. And so what's next? We launched in August, and we've been having subcommittee meetings in each of those 3 areas to move forward with our strategic plan. So we've been working with a national consultant out of Rhode Island who is an expert in women's funds, and as well as working with community foundations. And she's really helped us formulate our strategic plan for the next 2 years. So these 3 things are elements of that strategic plan. So when we look at employment, we are looking at implementing some strategies and tools to help employers attract and retain talent while supporting their low-wage workforce. We know that low-wage workforce is disproportionately made up of women and people of color. And so if we can help companies attract and retain this talent and help them grow their talent base within, we know that we'll be achieving 2 goals, right? Helping the economy of Fort Wayne and all of those amazing companies and businesses that we have, but we'll also be helping to support those women and people of color who primarily make up the low-wage workforce. We also will be in the personal safety arena looking at creating a system of supports primarily or partially in our judicial system for victims of domestic violence and violence education and financial help. We know that women cannot leave abusive situations until they themselves are financially healthy. And that's the #1 factor why women typically cannot leave those situations that they're in. So if we look at the systems level and we go deep and we look at building them up financially and getting resources, that hopefully they'll be able to leave the situations that they're in that may be violent. And then for young women and girls, we're going to be launching a new research, a new study, a new research really centering the voices of young women and girls, led by young women and girls, to help co-create change and increase resources. So we hope to be able to launch that this time next year, really having a lot of great data to help us move forward in that process. And last but not least, how can you get involved? So we have 5 Rotarians on the call today that are Women's Fund members. So I thank each of you. You are amazing. We are launching today our Architects campaign. We are looking to secure 100 members for the Women's Fund by March 1st, which is Women's History Month. We think that'll be a really great kickoff to that celebratory month. We also are going to need company partners when we talk about that strategy I referred to just a slide ago about helping build up our low-wage employees for companies to help them attract and retain talent. We need some companies who will be pilot models for us. So if you know of a company or a business that would be interested in that, if you know of someone who has trouble retaining those low-wage workers or finding that talent, we would love to partner with those companies. Also, you can always like and share on social media and just share the word about the Women's Fund overall. That was a lot of information that I just threw at everyone really quickly. But that's where we're at. So any questions?
I have a question. This is Barb Watchman, and I'm so happy to have both of you here today. On your most recent comments about the implementation and strategy tools to help employers attract and retain talent while supporting the low-wage employees, how do you do that? Like, just walk me through what you talk with an employer about to have them help you with your women's fund. So if you could just give me an example of that.
Sure. Yeah. So one concrete example, and we're so blessed that just like community foundations, which is a very sharing community nationwide, women's funds too are very sharing. And so we are not reinventing any wheels, thank goodness. So we are using a model based out of Cincinnati. It's Cincinnati's Women's Fund, which is housed at there at Greater Cincinnati Foundation. And they have created what they call an employer toolkit, which is nationally, it's over 60 different policies that are not specific to their region that can be used anywhere, that employers can use to help them increase and attract and retain that talent. So it's not just about paid family leave. That tends to be the thing that most people think of when they think about supporting women in the workforce. That's only one of 60 policies that can be implemented to really help attract and retain that talent and hold on to that. So Barb, I am happy to walk you through that and kind of give you some more dive deep information if you want. But yeah, we're hoping to be able to similarly implement a toolkit here in Fort Wayne. And like I said, we need some pilot companies first to help us work through any kinks that we might have. But I think it's all very exciting to help the overall economy.
Mhm. Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry, Steve?
Yes, well, I'm delighted to have your presentation today. Speaking from my experience on the United Way board, about 6 years ago, we introduced the concept of the Alice study of the people who are the working poor in the communities of the country, initiated first by United Way USA. And we found in the initial report about 42% of the families in Allen County were working poor. And when you add the levels of indigent poor to that, it gets approaching 50%, one half of our families in the county. That gave us an awareness and an education of a tremendous need here, but there was a lack of knowing what to do about it and what action steps can we help to improve our situation. And so I'm just delighted to receive your report that things are moving forward and we do have a plan and we are in action and we're being led by women, which makes it even better.
Thank you.
Well, we'd like to thank Brad and Allison for your presentations today. It's great to hear good work that's being done in this community. And so we thank you for your work and we thank you for your presentation.
Jeff, can I just say that
Yes.
This is Irene and I chair the steering committee of the Women's Fund. If anybody wants to reach out to me for more information, I'm happy to give it. Okay,
Great.
thanks.
Thank you, Irene. And
Yeah.
thank you for everything that you do in the community, Irene. You're stretched in so many different ways
Thank you.
and everyone appreciates it.